All right, Facebook family, YouTube family, we are live with Marvin Merriweather. The empowerment platform is here just to empower you to reach whatever goals that you may have. A little housekeeping for us tonight is, of course, StreamYard, which I'm using to broadcast. If you want to comment on Facebook only and you want your picture and your profile to show, you must go to this link, copy the address now and putting it in there. You must go to this link, click on it, and then once you do that, it will open you up to have your comments show, kind of like my comments just showed. So looks like that on Facebook, looks like this on YouTube. Marvin, how's it going?
Man, pretty good, brother. Pretty good. I can't complain too much. Excited about what we got to share today and kind of dig into some mental health questions and concerns.
Absolutely. And me and Marvin go all the way back to shoot, what, 2005?
Yeah, that was when I came to Tuskegee, 2005.
He came to Tuskegee, grabbed the band, joined, did his thing. Always a good guy, great guy. I just always remember good things. You know, we had a lot of fun, a lot of laughs
Oh
in
yeah, oh yeah.
that
It was a
time
good
period.
time, man.
And now you are a licensed clinical social worker and the
Yeah,
founder of Be Strong Mental Health and Therapeutic Services located in Springfield, Illinois.
yes, sir.
So, as we kick it off, just give us a little bit about your background, Marvin, your journey, and why mental health for you.
I was born and raised in Gary, Indiana. Not too familiar with Gary. About a population about 85,000 people. It's an industrial city, so uh, around like the 60s, 70s, and the early 80s, they produced a lot of steel.
Hmm.
So they got a lot of steel mill plants. I say demographically, it's about 85, 90% Black, African American people. Usually, once you get out of high school, around that time in the 60s, 70s, 80s, people left high school, didn't necessarily go to college, went directly to work at the steel mills. If you're familiar with Gary, it's right outside of Chicago, Northwest Indiana. So crime rate is a little bit high. That's what they're usually known for outside of Michael Jackson.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, lower income, not so great education system, but you were surrounded by people that look like you and talk like you and did everything like you. So you made do with what you had.
Right.
Um, let's see. I mean, it's full of Gary. It's a weird place, man. It's full of talented people, hardworking people, people that genuinely care. But they just kind of, it's frustrating because you're born into Gary, so you got to kind of struggle and make a way out of Gary. So a lot of people kind of got like hoop dreams and athletic dreams,
Mhm.
and sometimes that fall kind of short given the circumstances that women we were born into. I graduated from Roosevelt in 2005, like you said, left with Gary and decided to go to Tuskegee instead of staying in state, which was probably one of the best decisions I made was to leave Indiana and experience more. Um, After I finished at Tuskegee, made my way back up north, closer to home, maybe about 2.5 hours away from home, and ended up getting my graduate degree or my master's in social work from the University of Illinois in Champaign. Uh, After I finished that, I got about 8 years of experience in the actual social work field. Just working with different client populations struggling with a bunch of different mental health concerns, from depression, anxiety, PTSD or post traumatic stress disorder. I've worked with geriatric population in nursing homes, criminal population, kids that from that age range from 8 to 18. The Department of Children and Youth and Family Services, those wards that have been removed from the home, so they get put in residential treatment programs.
Mhm.
Worked with substance abuse, kids living at home, like still living at home, haven't been removed yet with behavioral health concerns. Worked in the healthcare field, hospice, geriatric population again. That have like chronic disease and a bunch of multiple comorbidities.
Okay.
So kind of got a lot of experience there. And then let's see why mental health for me.
Yeah.
I mean, so growing up, I was just I've always been observant. Just kind of sit back and watch, and I think Gary is a result of that because you really got to interact or be observant before you interact, just to kind of get a better sense of your surrounding and the people you interact with. But I didn't necessarily know what that meant growing up. You just
Mhm.
always paid attention to stuff. So in college, I mean, in high school, my last year of high school, I ended up taking some college prep classes. Started in nursing. All of them was in healthcare. So I thought I wanted to be an athletic trainer for the NFL.
Yeah.
Obviously, that didn't happen.
Hey, but you do
but
train.
yeah, yeah, I do work out a little bit.
Ah, man, I see you on all those videos, powerlifting, all of that, man. That's where it seems like that's the route that you were going.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it all worked out for itself, but I'm happy. I'm here. I'm happy where I am. Where I
Okay.
am. So yeah, finished those classes. Did those little college prep classes, um, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do. So I ended up taking those college prep classes and transitioned into nursing. Is what I initially started, or was my major at Tuskegee. Nursing didn't necessarily work out in my favor, mainly because I didn't know how to study at the time. First generation college student going to Tuskegee, 12 hours away from home. It was a struggle at first.
Right.
Uh,
Absolutely.
but honestly, that struggle was a silver lining because after not really succeeding in nursing, I transitioned over to social work, and that's where I really met like the mentor that pushed me to kind of get where I am right now, Dr. Gale. Best experience that I've ever had was with her, because mainly because she kept it real with me. I knew I didn't know how to study. I knew I was gonna flunk out if I didn't try, and she called me on that. Like, if you don't try and make an effort, then you won't be successful in life. And I needed that wake up call.
Wow, wow. Glad that you were able to get that and, able to pursue because we need people like you, and you operating in your gift will be that help that somebody else needs. And had you never had that positive reinforcement to move forward, we wouldn't be having this conversation today and would not be helping someone that may need it. So
Absolutely.
you did unpack all the different experience that you have with mental health. Let's talk a little bit about the stigma around seeking counseling. And I know in our community is a big stigma. You don't go
Man.
to you don't go to a counselor, you don't share your business and all the other types of things. And here at the empowerment platform, we just try to give you what you need, but also be transparent. I have
Hmm.
seen a counselor and still do see one for my own issues. With the VA, I see a pain management psychologist because
Okay.
I just deal with constant pain that medicine doesn't help. You can over medicate with the opioid epidemic. They're
Yep.
trying to do more for pain management. So I have seen my share of counselors
Hmm.
and been through that. But I do know that growing up, people didn't talk about seeing a counselor.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you always hear about the stigma around seeking counseling. Can you share a little bit about that with your experience? Why do you think it exists, and how can we get beyond that?
I mean, honestly, it's instilled in us. I mean, we don't historically we don't necessarily access healthcare. We don't do these things because we're afraid. Like, especially with mental health in our community, we don't necessarily we look at mental health or people seeking counseling as being crazy, or or they really need something, or they're
Right.
struggling. So those are like the negative things that are really associated when it shouldn't be looked at that. And even culturally, you even grew up. What happened in the house, stay in the house.
Right.
Uh, we don't put our business out. It's pointless to don't. Everybody don't need to be in our business, and to an extent that's kind of hurt us over time, where not putting our business out, not discussing our feelings, and having those tough conversations, we struggle. We struggle. It kind of carries over in adulthood, and men and women, especially being older, you struggle building positive and healthy relationships because you don't know how to communicate and have those conversations.
Wow, you absolutely, and it's definitely that. When you try to unpack everything between individuals that go on through their life, if they don't ever understand how to get it out, then when you get with someone or anyone you're butting heads on, this is the way I see it, this is the way you see it, and
Hmm.
you don't really have the right tools to communicate effectively and to get beyond that. So I do 100% see it all the time where people just refuse to get help, and that's from mental health issues to substance abuse issues. They
Mhm.
just, I can handle it. I got it.
And, and I think it's if we change how we look at it or how we approach mental health. I mean, I feel like we should almost approach mental health the same way we approach our physical health. If you look at just so hypothetically, if you had the flu, if you're vomiting, you got the chills, you got a fever, headache, you won't hesitate to go to the doctor because you know what's going on. Like more than likely, I have the flu, but it's rare that if you're sitting at home, you're not eating really, you overeating, oversleeping, you kind of feeling hopeless, you're agitated all the time. It's rare that you might say, oh, I really need to go out now. I think I'm gonna need to see a therapist because
Hmm.
there's something else wrong. And just having that stigma, it affects people so much from seeking help. But recently, I think it's increased a bit more due to, sadly, like mass shootings or
Right.
CTE, especially in sports. And even just with like kind of your situation, like being a veteran, the conversation about suicide, like
Hmm.
conversations about mental health have increased, but we still kind of struggle normalizing a conversation, or even just with us talking, me being able to be honest and open with you and say, hey, it sounds like you're struggling. It sounds like you're hurting right now. You might need to see somebody to kind of process those feelings and process what you're going
Absolutely. And then the comment you give, man, I don't need to see nobody. I got it. I
through.
handle it. And it's, see, for men especially, the, oh, you're weak and
Yeah,
you're not strong enough to handle whatever you handle. But that, it's just so, it pushes people the wrong direction. And then next thing you know, when, like you said, when suicide rates are going up, when people committing suicide, is then like, why didn't they get help?
hmm
When,
and even I think what I've run into now, what I do in my everyday job, my day-to-day job, it's not knowing the stigma itself prevents or provides lack of education around mental health. So like I have a patient that I work with now, he was struggling bad. And I talked to him about depression, and initially he was like, no, I don't know, how that. And then as I
Mhm.
started to talk to him more, he's like, oh, what is depression? I think I'm really going through that because I'm struggling at home, and I can't even talk to my wife or communicate with my wife. So just being educated opened up a whole new world to this man, and even allowed him to just talk about his situation a lot more.
Right. So once we get past the stigma, and I think you hit a big key point there, is with education, just knowing a little bit about what could be going on can get you to ask the right questions. Once we get beyond the stigma, at what point should a person seek a counselor? I know it's much broader and deeper than just that simple question, but when do you think, what are some of the, I guess, points or triggers where a
Mhm.
person may need to go ahead and see somebody?
So I guess that's a complicated question, to be
Right.
completely honest, because just like I bring that back to the example about going to the doctor, like when X, Y, and Z is happening, I need to seek a doctor. So I think we need to change the conversation to as opposed to when I should seek a counselor, as to why I should seek a counselor.
Okay.
And that just understanding why will open up a whole new world for you. Um, I guess so. If we looked at having a therapist in the same context, uh, I need mental health. I got a mental health crisis. I'm struggling with anxiety. I'm struggling with depression. And we looked at that as more preventative care. We started to seek a
Hmm.
counselor prior to, like, if personally, I'll use myself as an example. I have a good family support system, but also a benefit of being a therapist is having therapist friends. So yeah, so when I'm struggling with something, because I mean it happens to everybody, I don't mind picking up the phone, calling my counselor friend, and say, "Hey, process this with me, just to make sure that I'm doing okay, or I'm not crazy, I'm not missing something."
Hmm.
So honestly, I think everybody should have a therapist. You got a primary care doctor to educate you, to help you when you're sick. Why not have a therapist to process crisis and life events and things like that prior to a crisis where you're really feeling down, where you feel really feeling depressed and struggling with these feelings and emotions. So I
Oh,
think everybody should have a counselor.
oh, I like that. I never thought of it as a preventative thing,
Mm-hmm.
that everyone should have a counselor, at least to be, like you said, to talk to, when, to prepare for a crisis moment, and then to be able to go through a particularly bad situation or something going on. It's just I never thought about it in that manner, but it makes so much sense because the only way you really hear the preventative side is premarital counseling.
Yeah, yeah.
But everything else can have that same effect as well because we know these things exist and they may come up, but we just do not even take the steps to reach out to somebody. I like that. That's one of the notes I had to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Just preventative versus trying to put the band-aid on after it's happening.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, ultimately, sadly, the medical model is, their job is to treat, not necessarily cure. Uh,
Hmm.
so they don't necessarily provide those preventative things, but that's the beauty of mental health is we can provide preventative things. We can provide the education. We can prepare you for those things. If you know, like, I really don't think this relationship is right for me. Uh, Talk to somebody. Talk to a third party, a non-judgmental ear that can almost help you process that entire situation before you make that decision. And you might not even get to the point where you necessarily have to leave or exit that relationship. There could be some underlying issues that we talked about earlier, some past trauma, some mommy and daddy issues, or those business things that you kept in house that are affecting you now that you never processed with anybody.
And then once you get with a person, and I think I listened to TD Jakes. He said that a lot of people when they date and then they move on to somebody else, they're still dating that first person. So
Mm-hmm.
then they're unpacking everything on this second person
Yeah.
that has nothing to do with it, but it's just from their history because they never resolved it in the first place, and they
Yeah.
just bring it to the next relationship, and
Yeah,
then you
you
take
don't
it to
give
the next.
yourself time to heal. You don't understand who you are, and invest so much into a relationship and the other people that we often sometimes lose sight of who we are and what we care about and what we value because we put so much value on the relationship.
Wow. Wow. And that goes back to there's always a saying, some kind of saying where you need to be a whole you before you can be anything to anybody else.
Exactly.
And a lot of times we have a lot of broken people that get together and then the relationship is broken because the two people are broken. You don't have a whole in the beginning.
Man, that's right. You hit the nail on the head, bro. That's exactly what it is. So, and then you constantly bring hurt and pain into a relationship, and then think about if you have kids, that's just trickling down, and they're seeing the stuff that you're struggling with. So, how can they continue to grow and develop the right skills to be great people and lovers in relationships?
Right. Because kids model what the parents show, and
Exactly.
hurt people.
Hmm.
Wow. So now we talked about the stigma. We talked about as a preventative thing, seeking counseling. So, what are some of the top benefits to talking with, having a counselor, unpacking the things that you need to unpack? And I like the word that you use, process. You call a friend, ask them to process this with you versus having a problem. It's
Yeah.
more of a process type thing to help me get beyond where I am, and I just love that word process. It doesn't seem like it's so negative. It seems
Yeah.
like
It's
a
the
positive
process.
thing.
Yeah, it's not negative, and I think by calling it a process, you start to understand that it's not going to happen overnight. Like it was many years of built up trauma and pain and hurt that you need to unpack and figure out. So it's legitimately going to be a process. It's not a change. It's not going to happen overnight. You're going to have to invest a lot of effort and tears and everything into kind of changing or shifting the mindset to that situation.
Wow. Wow.
Uh,
And
but I mean, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
just hit a couple of the benefits that you think right off the bat for just seeking once you get counseling, once you get in, what benefits can you expect from it? And I just want to point out and make sure I run it by you to clarify, in order for counseling to work, you have to be willing.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the what I've learned through my experiences too is you have to be willing, you have to be ready for change or willing to even talk about change.
Mhm.
Because if you go into counseling resistant and expect the counselor to fix you, you're not going to get anything in the end.
Absolutely.
but like you said, like we kind of touched on earlier, just helping in initial crisis situation with unpacking depression, unpacking anxiety is always a benefit. But also, like I said, we touched on it earlier, helping work through past trauma that you know and unknowingly might be affecting you today. And just the relationship thing or communication, if you're not able to communicate effectively and you constantly getting passed over for promotion or something like that, that trauma in your personal life is trickling over into your work life and it's preventing you from growing and advancing. So just there's a lot of things that people don't necessarily take into account. Behavioral modification is also something that I think uh, is a benefit of therapy. And just like I kind of touched on it earlier, going to a doctor is important to you. The
Mhm.
doctor, his job is to treat. So he's going to treat, like hypothetically, he's going to treat your high blood pressure, give you medication for high blood pressure. But in passing, he's going to say, you know what, if you make some lifestyle changes, you could potentially get off this medication. But I'm
Right.
going to go ahead and give you this medication. And a lot of people don't understand, like, well, if I make these lifestyle changes, then I will be better at, getting off this medication and having other problems due to it. So behave like seeking a therapist to say, hey, I am struggling with my high blood pressure. Well, let's sit down and as a social worker, I'll look at everything. I'm looking at, well, what are you eating? How are
Mhm.
you interacting with your kids? What's your stress level look like? So we take all those things into account and we come up with a plan to figure out, well, we need to make some adjustments in these behaviors in order for you to be successful and get off this medication. So I think behavior modification or lifestyle changes is a perfect reason to see a therapist. And even ultimately just having an honest outside perspective for emotional support, and somebody that can just be there or kind of help you process things that are going on in everyday life.
Wow. I just keep going back to the preventative part of it, and everything you're speaking to is a way for a whole life balance
Hmm.
and
Yeah, it's
adding
holistic care.
right, adding mental health counseling or just counseling in there, whether you feel like something's right or wrong, or if you feel like everything, you still, if you have that conversation, may be able to find something like you said that you're not even aware of.
Hmm.
And I think
Correct.
that is just a phenomenal thing because how many people can be doing so much more or be doing so much more better if they just talk to someone about issues that they're holding inside or they're trying to get over it themselves and that type of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm going to use myself as an example. After I finished grad school, I struggled with what am I doing? Like I worked in all that agency work, and that experience was rough for me. It was hard because I wasn't making decent money, had all the student loan debt,
Mhm.
started gaining weight. I wasn't as active, so my aha moment really came when, like I said, I played sports all through my life. So I stopped playing sports after college, gained about 300 pounds, and my mental health started to suffer. So, I'm not happy. I'm frustrated all the time. So that's kind of how I got into the powerlifting and weightlifting. Is like you need
Mhm.
to do something for yourself. If you're not feeling good about yourself, then you can't be a good boyfriend, a good brother, a good family member until you take care of yourself. So that's my self care. That's how I take care of myself. Like being a social worker, you get all people pour their problems on you, help them
Right.
process it. So I have to do something to just kind of decompress at the end of the day and get my mind back mellow and get back to my baseline so I'm not taking on those problems from my clients.
Oh wow. And that was something that I didn't even think about, just being able to take the load and bear the load and then decompress, and you have to get it out as well because it can affect you, I guess, if you allow it to and bring
Yeah.
you down.
And
And
this is social workers and people in healthcare field, they get burnt out. Especially in social work and counseling, case management, they get burnt out so fast because some people don't know how to compartmentalize and not take on the burden of their clients or take it home or stress about it.
oh, just wow. So we mentioned it a little bit earlier before, but going back to our community specific background, culture, for us, you don't see a lot of black counselors out there. And I'm quite sure that other races may have the same, Asians, and what is it, the importance of having a counselor that looks like me? Because I know a lot of people may think of, well, they don't live in my community, they don't know my history, they don't know my background. How can they actually help me? So, should we be seeking counselors that have our same type of background, culture as I guess, a plus one, or can anyone? I guess I'm trying to figure out, can anyone help me, or should I try to find somebody that looks like me?
Um, I won't even say necessarily looks like you, but that's culturally competent.
Hmm.
uh, in the sense that that understands that when you meet with a black person or African American client, that it's going to be a lot harder to unpack things because of that stigma that they have already instilled in them, or that they have a mistrust for people in the healthcare field. So you got to do a lot of digging and a lot of relationship building before you might even get them to open up. And a lot of client, I guess you might see some frustration from uh, people that's not that can't relate to you culturally. So it's a
Hmm.
lot harder to build that therapeutic relationship with somebody. And it all really depends on where you are demographically too. If you live in Atlanta, there's plenty of black therapists there, but I also think it's kind of twofold in the reason there's not a lot of black therapists out there. One is because demographically it's hard. Like I'm in Springfield, it's probably five, between 3 to 5 of us in 100-mile radius, and even a black male, it might be only two of us out here, to be completely honest. Um, but the second part of that is just a lot of, we get caught up in the case management work. Social workers aren't necessarily valued in agency work, so we get stuck in that case manager, social worker, connecting the resources, those reactive services as opposed to the
Hmm.
preventative
Hmm.
services. So it's a lot harder for us to kind of break that threshold. So that's part of why I kind of decided, like, well, you have the credentials, you have these things, you have the experience, you need to put yourself out here to be able to help the community, to be able to help people grow past and understand what mental health is.
Wow. So, all that being said, you decided to launch your own practice. Tell us
Correct.
a little bit about that, why you decided to launch your own practice, and what's your plan? What's your goal for your practice?
So I think starting a practice has always been a goal or something that, so at Tuskegee, that I bring Dr. Gill up. Uh, since getting my BSW, the whole thing was that y'all need to make sure you pursue an MSW. You need to make sure you pursue a clinical license if you want to practice at the top of your license. So opening up a practice, I guess, has always been a goal, but I didn't know what I wanted to do with that.
Hmm.
Then also being in agency work, I feel like you kind of spin your wheels. You got to extend like extra crazy caseloads, 80, 90 clients, which ultimately, you want to help, but it ends up being ineffective because you have so many clients and you just don't have the opportunity to affect change the way you want to. So I guess moving past, once I finally got past like agency work and knowing like I just can't do this, I'm not feeling valued, I'm not growing professionally, I keep hitting the glass ceiling. I finally got in a role in my everyday job where I felt valued, and I started to see that the conversations aren't normalized. People aren't necessarily doing preventative things to help
Right.
people from getting into the situations they're in now. Like I'm in, I work with people with kidney disease right now, and a lot of those people they have conversations with doctors. They have high blood pressure. And let me give a disclaimer: I'm not a doctor, so I'm not telling you stop taking your blood pressure medications or anything like that.
Hmm.
But I am seeing that there's always been an opportunity for somebody to intervene early in the phase to help them make better decisions or better choices, and they necessarily maybe didn't have that person. I just kind of look back at how I've been able to get where I am. I've always had a social support system. I've always had somebody to lean on. Even when I struggled, I had somebody, and there's not a lot of people that have that out here right now, and just especially that look like us. So just trying to normalize that, and having a passion for, like, yo, I've always been in a decent situation to help somebody.
Hmm.
and now, or not, or do things that prevented me from going in a different path. So why not take this opportunity and this platform to stand on my soapbox and be able to help somebody, grow and get past trauma and get past struggle. So hopefully, at one point in their life, they can say, you know what, I need to help somebody else. I need to be able to reach out and just be that somebody for somebody.
Got you. Got you. So, with what services, and I know you went through them earlier with your background and your experience, but what are some of the specific things that you are focusing on for your practice, your clientele? What are the things that you will help them with? What?
So I like a strength based perspective, I guess, as far as theories that I just kind of gravitate towards more so. Strength perspective, just looking at clients saying like everybody has strengths, everybody has weaknesses,
Mhm.
but let's focus on those strengths. Let's focus on that and grow from those, or pick and choose how can we continue to grow from these strengths. But I also, growing up in Gary, person and environment theory, uh, you hear it all the time. People are a product of their environment.
Right.
So so how does that affect how we make decisions? So I wanted to provide services that not only were beneficial, but also that helped me grow and helped me become where I am today. So some of the services I'm looking at, well, that I offer, individual therapy, which is just one-on-one sessions, with the client, just kind of hoping to improve understanding, set goals, and kind of work towards desired change. Also, family therapy. I want to be able to help people build healthier relationships and be able to resolve conflicts and be able to communicate better. Um, Couple things that I'm really passionate about is I don't, just kind of through my experiences, I realized that working with kids 13 and under is not for me. It's not for me at all, but only because I say kids, parents screw kids up. I hate to throw it out there, but parents are, you can work with a kid, or I've been in situations where I've worked with a kid, we made so much progress, and this kid goes back home to a toxic environment, and his family completely tore down everything that we've been working towards.
Wow.
So I prefer to work with 13 and up, 13 to college, if they're kids, 13 until 18, 20, whatever. And I want to be able to provide mentoring or clinical mentoring, which
Okay.
would be a step past mentoring, where a traditional mentor might say, "Oh, well, let's go play basketball and talk about life," but that's still just scratching the surface.
Right.
I want to I want to be able to sit down and work on wellness and improve communication, and have them have look at life in a different perspective to ultimately have a better quality of life. So with my clinical mentoring, I ended up getting my level 1 CrossFit license, so I can become a coach. But at the same time, I want to use my clinical background and combine the two. Like, well, let's do some weightlifting. Let's let's process functional fitness. Let's
Mhm.
understand the way your body moves, but also let's process some trauma and some things that you necessarily won't talk to your family about. So clinical mentoring is something I'm really excited about offering. And then also emotional check-ins is something that I like, or I'm interested in offering, which is for those people that might say, well, therapy is not necessarily for me.
Okay.
They have a life crisis where I'm shifting jobs, and I need to talk to somebody or process these emotions or feelings that I'm having with that. So it's not necessarily as deep as individual therapy. It's just short term solution focused therapy, so we can work one on one and figure out how we can tackle or handle this problem more solution oriented or solution focused. Um, and then ultimately, I want to be able to give back to other social workers. I want them to be able to get to where I am, so they can help people, and creating a network of culturally competent social workers. So I'm offering clinical supervision to people with the MSW, or looking towards for supervision so they can sit for their clinical license. Teletherapy is something that I'm thinking about offering if I get enough interest, because I get, like we talked about earlier, that you might not have somebody in your area that you can
Right.
actually connect to or relate to. So let's sit down, let's chat over a computer, let's figure this thing out over the internet. So that's something. If I get enough interest in that, teletherapy is also on the table. And then lastly, I guess, just kind of similar to my clinical mentoring with youth, I think that I want to offer, it's actually going to be called mental health in motion.
Okay.
So it's that individual therapy session with some functional fitness to help decrease anxiety, depression, and encourage self care. So you'll get that fitness component, so you can work on those preventative things to
Mhm.
prevent chronic disease and stuff like that. But you're also getting that clinical piece to help you process those emotions.
Wow, that's amazing. It's so much there, so much value that you're giving. I really, really, everything that you said, I liked the emotional check-in. I think is just that's amazing because for people who don't want to do, like you said, deep dives or long term, they just need, I'm trying to get this new job. I'm a little anxious about it. How can I work through and process the anxiety part of it and just
Hmm.
be able to check in with you on that? You step them through that, and then boom, they're good to go. So I've never heard emotional checkup at all. Like
Yeah,
that's something that is groundbreaking to me
yeah,
because I
yeah.
just
I mean,
never heard it. And it just sounds like it's perfect for people.
yeah, because you don't, like I said, that's gonna help break the stigma. Because if if you just need that initial check in, somebody to support you emotionally, that's what it's there for, so you can process those things. But if it's something that I pick up on, like, it's a lot more trauma here that we need to dig into, then it's a lot easier transition from emotional check in to legit individual therapy. But at least we opened the door and started the conversation with those emotional check ins.
Wow. And then also like the now for anybody that may be local to Marvin, don't let him fool you with that working out part because I seen him power lift and I seen him work out and he does it to a high level.
Oh
I'm
no,
watching him
man.
lift all those weights. He might have you trying to dead squat 1,000 pounds before you get out of there.
No, no, we'll take it easy. We start slow, and it's even with that. Granted, it's functional fitness, but I'm starting at where the client is. If you've never worked out a day in your life, we can go for a walk and talk, kind of thing. It's getting out of those traditional therapeutic
Mhm.
settings that you might be in somebody's office or something like that. But just it's giving you other options to kind of just to help decrease anxiety, to help to just try something different. So I'm really excited about offering that, and I hope it takes off. I'm really excited to see where it could go, because even therapists, I'm trying to be your therapist, because
Right.
because we like I said, we get burnt out, we struggle. I feel like I have a great self-care routine that adds value to me in my personal life. But at the same time, I think a lot of conversations about self-care in social work is a bit superficial. It's, oh well, I read. Well, what kind of value is reading doing? We don't go deeper than just reading, or I go shopping, and something like that. I work out, but as I work out, I'm decompressing from my job. That's my why. But I'm in a great community surrounded by supportive people that that, because I'm in Springfield, I don't have family here, so my family is a gym family.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. You mentioned kids, and I know from younger kids up to high school, I hear a lot when I'm mentoring in the middle schools, and I hear a lot of they even use the word depressed a lot more. I'm
Mhm.
depressed. And it's a lot to do with video games and being online. It's if I'm not on the video games, I'm not happy. If I'm
Mhm.
not online, I can't connect with my friends. And I was hearing some students because what we did was they had a debate, and the topic of the debate was if should parents be held liable by the government for causing internet addiction, allowing overuse of social media. So the kids were debating that. You had half saying no, parents shouldn't be. Kids, we know that we're on it, we should take a break. Then the other kids were like, well, who gives you the device? Who buys,
Yeah.
who gives you that access? So it's the parent. But what I noticed was a lot of the kids that were against it,
Mhm.
or they were for it, but they were saying, well, I don't have any friends unless they're online.
Mhm.
And that's how I cope. When I'm having issues, I cope. I go online with my friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even one little girl, she said, yeah, I have so much social anxiety that I can't really talk to kids at school. I have to get online.
Mhm.
And when I talked to my counselor, and we talked about the same thing. He helped me unpack things, and then we go off and talk about other stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
I try to glean advice from him. He mentioned the same thing, that he was saying that the mental health profession as a whole is starting to really focus on this internet addiction and social anxiety. What do you think about that for the younger generation, and what can we do?
So it's crazy. So I actually did at Tuskegee. I did a research. My research for my senior year was called what is it? Technology's effect on interpersonal communication. And this was back in like 2012, 2010, somewhere around there. And it's crazy that it's more relevant now than it was back then. But the question itself, what can we do about internet addiction and social anxiety? I think it's almost a twofold question. I don't necessarily think it's an internet addiction, and you kind of hinted at it too. It's not an internet addiction. It's an addiction to for attention or for feedback. And
Mhm.
don't get me wrong, I've met some of my best friends on playing Xbox.
Right.
That live in a completely different state, but just having that need for attention or for positive feed or just feedback in general. We invest so much time in especially on social media, with wanting the perception or caring about the perception of other people based on what we put out there. I don't think it's necessarily a addiction to the internet itself. It's the feedback, and with society today, it's almost immediate feedback, which
Yes.
is and it's exactly what Facebook and Instagram is for. It's the likes, it's for the comments, and that's how they keep you coming back. I got a problem with it because I'm scrolling through my phone like, man, I posted this picture. Let me see who I liked it. It said something, but it's that in itself that causes the addiction. Is you want feedback, positive or negative. You think about when we grew up, we didn't have that. So if you
Right.
put on your best outfit, your feedback wasn't gonna get, you wasn't getting that until you got to school, and either they was gonna roast you or be like, yo, that's a dope ass outfit you got on right
Yep. Yep.
now. so that I think that covers the internet portion or the addiction piece. But then the second part of that is there's the social anxiety, and I think a lot of that is rooted in not being able to communicate because or losing like those communication skills because we're gravitating to having friends on the internet and having social media. So we don't necessarily know how to interact with people. And I bring up Gary again, where growing up, if somebody looked you in the eye, you like, oh, well, he looking at me. What he got to say? He got a problem with me. We got. I'm
Mhm.
gonna have a conversation with him, as opposed to like, oh, that's a sign of respect. Like, I'm looking at you in your eye
Right.
because this is how we communicate. I'm relaying that I'm paying attention to you while you're talking to me, kind of thing. So if we can improve communication to and how we approach social anxiety, or I guess that in order to fix the social anxiety piece, we need to improve the communication and how we communicate with other people. But then we also, with the internet addiction, we gotta be able to sit down and have kind of real conversations as opposed to just looking for some
Mhm.
feedback on the internet.
Yeah, and it's all like you said, for sure and for likes. You never know what lifestyle is beyond that. It's almost
Hmm.
like Facebook, and we're on social media, we're using it, and everything in moderation is good. Social media has
Yeah.
done wonders for the world, but overuse is what we're talking about. And the filter, it's almost like everything's a filter. You
Yeah.
see the best of people when they post, you don't see everything behind it. It's just like
Hmm.
a movie. Shoot, people are winning winning the movie. The good guys always win.
Yeah.
Everything's beautiful, perfect, the perfect relationship, love, man, everything's just phenomenal there. But that's not real life, and it takes a lot to get there and a lot of work. So
Yeah.
we have a couple of questions that's coming through. I'm gonna show one. How do you cope with processing trauma while still in a toxic environment, even as an adult?
Um. Okay. Repeat that one more time.
How do you cope with processing trauma, or how can you process trauma while still in a toxic environment, even as an adult?
Mm, if you want me to be honest with you, you can't. you can't. I mean, Maslow hierarchy of need. You can't build without a foundation. You can't continue to grow or process trauma if you're constantly experiencing trauma. So when I worked with kids with behavioral problems, you got to remove the toxic situation out, or you got to remove the kid out of that environment in
Mhm.
order for them to be able to process and grow and think effectively. So I don't think that can actually happen. You can, because you're always going to continue to be re-traumatized unless you remove yourself from the situation, then start to unpack all the trauma that you've experienced prior to.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So first thing is removal, then unpack and process to get to working through the issue.
Yep.
Another question. Do you think the side effects of narcotics and opioids can be contributing to depression?
Um. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in my personal opinion, yeah. Mainly because if it's not taken into account, or if it's not done knowing that the goal is to wean yourself off of the narcotics or off of the opioids, that's the end goal. It should be just temporary to manage the pain or whatever those
Mhm.
things is in the short term, but over time the goal should be, to decrease the opioids, so you won't kind of go into that spiral or that feeling of I need this, which continues to add to depression and anxiety.
Right. And I can speak to that from a personal standpoint of you start taking those pills, and like you said, they're supposed to be for pain relief, but when you have issue kind of like one I deal with where pain does not go away, I ended up taking them, and then I'm mixing them with other pills, and then I'm taking more of them, and it's never enough.
Yeah.
And it does make you more depressed because now you're saying this isn't working for me. I'm taking these pills, I'm seeing these doctors, it's not working, and it makes life very difficult. And you
Mhm.
just take them, and you get like my friend said, you get numb. You just don't want to feel a thing, but it's not helping in the long run.
Yeah, sorry about the wiggle. I got to grab a charger real quick, running low on juice. But yeah, I completely agree, man. It's a cycle, and unless you have somebody to kind of help you figure those things out, you're gonna continue to struggle with the depression, especially since it's not, those narcotics and those things aren't working anymore.
Right. So, do you think some of the ways we learn to communicate are more problematic today than when we grew up? And I don't really know what's behind his question from that, but I want to throw a little personal mix in there. I remember growing up and the family talking to you real hard and rough,
Hmm.
and you better do this way, you got to do this, or I'm gonna do this, or this will happen to you, and all kind of stuff. How, and it seems like we were
Sorry.
okay with that growing up, but you can't talk to kids the same way today because just their whole reaction is different than what it was when, oh, if you don't go in there and get your bag, I'm gonna tear your tail up type of thing.
Yeah.
Were we really okay, or do we have some inner thing that we just haven't dealt with?
Both, man. To be completely honest, it's we also grew up in a time where it was okay to be insensitive. It was okay to call somebody gay and everybody laugh about it, and that's not how society is today. And it's hard for people to change that mindset. Like, it's not cool to say those kind of things because we grew up in a time where it was okay, or it was, you would even hear on TV and commercials that, jokes like that.
Mhm.
And now it's not. You have to be more sensitive to situations because the wrong thing said to somebody could trigger them, or could, somebody could be having a bad day, and saying things like that, it just brings them down, and you never know what somebody else is dealing with. So
Wow.
I don't know, we grew up in a weird time, but I'm happy where we are as a society today, but we still got a lot of growing to do.
I listened to I can't even remember who it was, and I do not like not having the full thing, but I'm gonna say it anyway. I think it was Simon somebody, and he said the the worst thing in our society now is not necessarily that people aren't working harder, they're not doing this, they're not doing that, but everybody's walking through life as I'm okay. Never really happy, never feel really fulfilled. But most people, and he was saying most, are gonna live their life going through just being okay.
Yeah.
How do
And
we, I guess that talks back to your preventative measures, just to, have everybody should have somebody to talk to eliminate that.
yeah, and honestly, historically, we as Black people are resilient. We've been through so much, so we know how to bounce back from trauma and things like that. But we also, we suppress those feelings a lot. So, I mean, it's okay to hurt. It's okay to go through things, but at the same time, like what's that baseline? Like in mental health, we look at a baseline. This is the normal behavior. But what happens when that normal behavior is under the baseline? What happens when you're constantly feeling down and constantly depressed and constantly feeling anxious, and then that starts to trickle over into other things like I'm not eating, I'm not sleeping, I'm being rude to my wife, or
Mhm.
that's when you really need to start to seek the help, because it's past that point of I'm okay. It's to the point where I need some help.
Right, right. And I can see a comment. I noticed that my parents and I become very defensive when even being slightly criticized. Even with friends of mine, I noticed that when we talk, how aggressive we are towards each other. And it is really helpful when we are going, and is that really helpful when we are going through things? From my perspective, it's not helpful at all, because when you become defensive, it brings shutdown. Then the
Hmm.
conversation stops
Yeah.
and nobody's really getting their point across at that moment, and we're not on the same side then trying to get through it together. We're just trying to get our point across, almost like
Hmm.
who's going to win.
Yeah. Yeah. And at that point, you got to step back, because I'm not gonna win. You're not gonna win. And that's when you really need to have that third party or somebody to come in and help y'all kind of dissect what's going on, because there could be underlying issues or animosity that's causing that brick wall, causing y'all to bump heads all the time. So I mean, just sitting down, talking to them, and having an effective way to communicate. With my significant other, we don't yell, we don't argue, we don't fight, and if it gets to that point, I do shut down, and it's like, hey, I'm not going to talk to you right now, only because I don't want to say the wrong thing, or I don't want to raise my voice. I want to be able to approach what we're dealing with a clear head, so we can, come together and come up to a good conclusion.
Right, right. So it going that direction, what happens when either family or couples, one person doesn't want the counseling part of it? One person's willing, the other person's not. But and I want to keep it, try to make it, they want to be together,
Hmm.
but they do have issues, but one person's just not willing. What does the other person do?
That's hard. I mean, that's a hard one to do. I mean, if you want to have a successful relationship, there has to be give and take on both ends.
Mhm.
I mean, you can invest all the time you want in the change, but if that other party is still making the bad decisions and still not, making an effort towards change, it's always going to be conflict there.
Gotcha, gotcha. Another question I have, as a lot of
Oh
these
man,
are
questions going crazy tonight. I guess I'm doing a good job. I was over here nervous.
oh yeah, oh yeah. A lot of these things, with alcohol addiction, n- is that in itself, alcohol, you can become an alcoholic, be addicted. Is that usually because of something underlying? Like there's another problem that the alcohol is really just the surface cover. It's not
More.
the
Oh,
thing,
continue.
but it's what's covered. It's the coping mechanism.
Yeah, more or less. That's I feel like that's with any addiction, not just alcoholism.
Okay.
It's that the substance is what you're using to treat whatever void there is. There's more or less there is something missing, if it's relationships, if it's how you're coping, but you need to talk to somebody to dig into, why am I drinking so much? Why am I substituting this thing for something I'm missing. So you do need, you got to talk to somebody and figure out why am I doing this? Why is it affecting me? And the alcoholism and the addiction itself really becomes a problem, like I said earlier, when it's trickling over and affecting relationships and affecting something else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How can parents model, I guess, proper communication tactics? Or do you have, or do you know of resources that parents can use to model the proper way for effective communication, a loving environment? And it's something that I struggle with myself because I'm so used to a family that you do we need you to do right now. This is the way I need to do it. And it's that rough, harsh talk. And I, you know, my wife had to let me know that during my son basketball game, all I would do is you need to do this better, you need to do that better. And after the game, we would spend 30 minutes of me telling him what all you need to do better,
Yeah.
but I wasn't being supportive. And I didn't even
Hmm.
realize it.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to take a step back. I mean, we want our kids, and I don't even have kids, but we want, them to succeed and be great. But you also got to step back and allow them to grow and develop. I mean, communicating, you got to find the best way to do it. If it's not yelling, it's not being disrespectful, it's not talking down to them. It's allowing, especially it depends on what age they are and
Mm.
what area and development they are. Because sometimes you, like I say, you might have to be stern and say, hey, these are the expectations and set some structure. But then there's also times where you have to step back and reevaluate how you're approaching them. So it all depends, man. It's so many different ways to communicate effectively. It's just making sure that you don't have any underlying problems and issues that's affecting how you communicate to your kids.
Wow. Yeah. Yes, because if you are still not processing and haven't unpacked things, then you will just pass that right along to your kids in the way you talk to them, the way you raise them, and you're modeling how you deal with problems, and they just pick it right up.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a another thing that we try to do, and I like when you talked about mentoring and trying to get beyond that mentorship to do further, because it's I'm going to the school to try to talk to the kids about being the best you can be at doing this and being that,
Hmm.
doing your best. And then some of these
Yeah.
kids, they have that trauma.
Hmm.
They have that I didn't get 3 meals today. My only meal is going to come from the school.
Yeah.
Or and one of the schools that I mentor at is on a base, and some of their parents can't get on base due to past offenses. They can't get ID. They can't get on base. So anytime something happens at the school, they're not even available to be there with their kids.
Hmm.
And that is something that a kid told me, and it's kind of when I started the the reason why I started this was because the kid said that everything you tell me sounds great, but that is not my reality at home.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to change or help kids when that environment is so bad, man. It's frustrating. I see, when I worked in residential with kids that were DCFS wards. They took them from the home. We would work with the kids and work with the kids. The family did what they were supposed to do most times to get the kids back, but then they go back to that environment. Not much has changed, and
Right.
it wasn't necessarily the kid's behavioral problem. It was the environment that was causing those problems.
And a lot of times, I guess when they get to school, then it's the kid that is being seen. They have this behavior issue. They have this
Hmm.
going on, but digging deeper, you see that it's just the environment,
Yeah.
and that if
And I'm
the
happy I look at
environment,
it from a holistic perspective.
yeah.
You when you meet with a social worker, we look at all that stuff. We take all those things into account, and we try to come up with a holistic approach or something that's going to take all that into account, so we can necessarily, or so we can directly focus on the trauma and the things that are causing these behaviors.
Another question for you, and I'll answer it as well. From my perspective, as a mentor, how hard is it to crack through the person's experience to get to the actual problem? What has been the most fulfilling part of mentoring? I'll go first and keep mine short, and then I'll let you take it. For me, with kids, it is difficult to crack through initially. You see a lot of they're being silly or they're attention seeking. Once you get beyond that, then you start to hear the stories of, well, I don't have my dad at home. He's in prison, or my mom's always working, or I haven't had a meal, or I don't have this support. And once I get to that point, then I'm able to actually help the kids see that it's not you.
Hmm.
It's you going through something, but it's not you. And you can get further with yourself. Even if you don't feel supported, here's a network where you can get some support from. And that's what I'm trying to break out now. That's fulfilling. The most fulfilling part of that for me is to know that I've impacted somebody's life, and hopefully just being that one person to touch them, to say something to them, will help them lead a better life, because everybody has some gift, some
Hmm.
purpose, something. And when you don't t- touch this person, their gift is gone, and it may not never get released to the world. I mean,
Yeah.
I heard somebody say that we always celebrate the Einsteins and the people, Picassos, but how many of Einsteins and Picassos do we have sitting around this 6 billion people planet that just don't have that support to even try to get their best out?
Hmm.
And that's what's
And
fulfilling for me, just to try to help somebody and just to be one person to say that you can do it.
yeah, and I'm gonna work backwards from this question. I think you hit the nail on the head. Like the most fulfilling part in working with kids is seeing change, is seeing them make the best decision that you would have made or you would have made for them,
Mhm.
and growing. And like yes, I've experienced trauma and it's a part of me, but it's not what's gonna define me. So helping them get to that point is the best feeling that you can have. But just like even going back further, the way to get through to anybody is by building a healthy relationship,
Right.
regardless if it's a kid or if it's a client, 30, 90-year-old client. You have to be able to build a healthy therapeutic relationship for them to even be willing to open up and unpack those kind of things. So if you just focused on this kid not talking to me, this kid not talking to me, you need to figure out why this kid is not talking to me. Do we even
Yep.
have the relationship that he even feels comfortable talking to me about? Are you asking the right questions? So that you got to be able to build that relationship first before you can even begin to relate and open up more to what's going on with the kid or be an effective mentor. I mean, you can play basketball with them all day, but if you're not adding value or building a relationship with them, you're gonna continue to struggle as a mentor.
Wow. And you I was sitting with a principal at a middle school last week, and we were trying to talk just a game plan on how I can launch a small mentorship program in that school. He brought in his guidance counselor, and his guidance counselor said exactly what you said. He said a lot of times people come in, they try to talk to these kids, they don't get anywhere because they don't have trust.
Hmm.
What I recommend you do is come and hang out in the lunchroom. Just be around.
Yeah.
Just be in the hallways. And then once they see you and you start to build a relationship, then they will be open to mentorship, and they won't
Hmm.
feel like you're just somebody that's going to stop in, say a couple of things, and then now you gone. And that
Yeah.
probably causes more damage when people come in, do a little bit, and then quit on them.
Yeah, that's a lot of situations like that. They, especially if they already have feelings of abandonment and they have that in their head, like you just like somebody else. You just like my dad. You gonna come in, you gonna leave. I'm not gonna see you. You just gonna talk bad about me, kind of thing. So until you got that healthy relationship and that's it, less stable, and you really understand that, then you won't be able to grow. You won't be able to be effective at all.
Wow. Wow. Well, Marvin, we have breached the hour mark.
No,
It doesn't even
man,
seem like it's
it has.
been
It's been
that
a
long.
great conversation, man. It's been great.
And this is so needed. A lot of things that you said in here, I've never even thought about myself. And it's very needed in our community. I mean, even with Kobe Bryant's passing and people talking about, oh, now people are starting to show that it's okay to cry. It's just a
Hmm.
lot of things that we hold on the inside, and they're uncomfortable conversations.
Hmm.
It is, but I I think now at this point, I'd rather be uncomfortable and be healthy than
Yeah,
to be comfortable and hurting on the inside, because you're really just hurting yourself in the long run and people that you
absolutely.
come in contact with. So if you want to leave us with anything to think about, tidbits, I will definitely want to have you back on at some point to go even further than where we went, because I can probably come up with another 40 questions.
Oh yeah, we could talk all day about it, man. I love this. I'm passionate about it. I guess I don't know if you probably heard it. I'm pretty sure you heard it because it's on my website. It's something that I kind of a motto that I kind of live by. It's by Booker T. Washington, and its success is measured not so much by the position one has reached in life, but by the obstacles they have overcome. So you're gonna have obstacles. You're gonna have things that you have to go through, hoops that you got to go through. But those are what define you. You know, failing isn't bad. Failing forward is the only way you can grow and learn. So you know, don't hesitate to reach out to a therapist. Reach out to me if you just want to have a conversation, get some insight on you know what's going on. You know, if I can't help you, I definitely try to get somebody in your life that can.
Wow. And how can we reach you? And I'm gonna post
Uh,
your information as well, but just give them a little blurb on how they can reach you, your website, that type of thing.
Yep. The website is Be Strong, BESTRONGMH, mental health. So just kept it short, BeStrongMH.com is the website. You can email me directly at Merriweather, MERRI, then weather outside at BeStrongMH.com. Or if you want to just give me a phone call, don't hesitate. It's 201-338-0335.
And do you have a Facebook page?
The Facebook page is actually, if you get to the website, it's Be Strong MH or Be Strong Mental Health. If you go to the website, there's also a hyperlink at the bottom, take you to my Facebook page and my Instagram page. Everything's still fairly new, but as I continue to grow, I can't wait to continue to put out more education and at least have these conversations on the Facebook page or you know on the Instagram page. So just kind of continue to look out for more education and material as I continue to grow as a business.
Absolutely. Well, Marvin, I thank you so much. And I thank everybody that joined us. We had some excellent questions coming through from the audience. And it's just, I believe that people want to have this conversation.
Yeah,
So I definitely will appreciate if you come back again so
yeah.
we can
Hopefully
have
you invite me.
another deep dive into some other things, maybe get more questions answered, just so people can have, that check in, because
Yeah,
maybe somebody may not call, but they may feel comfortable just checking in on a live. And again, I thank you, family, for joining us. And at the Empowerment Platform, we are just here to empower you to get beyond your situation, your circumstance, and to achieve whatever goal that you have. It's not all about everybody trying to make $1 million. That may not be your goal, but whatever goal that you have, we're here to provide the resources and tools to empower you. And we will see you next week. Thank you all.